we've had this in the United States where missile batteries, armed missiles, have surrounded Washington since the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s.
At Flight 93, the widow of the pilot of that flight and Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge are among the speakers scheduled. There will also be a moment of silence and a 21-gun salute. Now, the anniversary is being marked in other parts of the world, too. In France, a ceremony is about to get underway at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. French President Jacques Chirac is scheduled to speak, followed by a playing of the American and French national anthems. And after that, there will be a moment of silence. Last night, and about the field there today.
Good morning to you all, Liz. The ceremony this morning is an ecumenical service being held on behalf of those who lost their lives in the World Trade Center and Pentagon attacks in the United States.
Remember what terror cost us. We also, yesterday, were reminded that we're still at war, that terror still lurks around every corner, yet this goes on. How important is it?
And we're covering a news story with bomb-sniffing dogs all around us, putting our...
Hussein, Michelle, what are we expecting to see today at the Pentagon?
Jane, as you said, that ceremony starts in just about 3.5 hours' time. President Bush will be here, as will the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. They'll be the main figures attending this service, which is not open to the public.
If you're planning on coming here today, you cannot drive to the site. You must take one of the sponsored buses, and there are only, you need to make sure that you're on a bus that is designated to come to this area. There are some people that are trying to run a scam where they claim if you pay them, they'll get you there. But as Sophia Wharton knows, she's at the...
You come out here. You know, there are a lot of events where you can look back and say, I know exactly where I was at that time. You can go to the assassinations of John and Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, when man landed
up. Set to take place there today.
There is a flurry of activity at Ground Zero. Security is tight, and as you can see behind me right now, crews are getting set for today's solemn ceremony.
Rash Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In the afternoon, they will have a second 2-hour ceremony that will honor the construction workers who did an unbelievable job in rebuilding this side of the Pentagon near the helipad, a building that I used to know quite well when I worked here as CNN's Pentagon correspondent before and during and after the Gulf War. It's a building that lost on the ground 125.
It's across the way from World Financial Center, right above the Century 21 department store. We're bringing you another perspective from Ground Zero. How about from the security guard perspective, security supervisor? Joining us right now, a very familiar face to those at Fox, Jose Ramirez. He used to work over at the Fox building, the News Corp building where you guys are. He ran out of the South Tower as it was collapsing. Security supervisor over at Morgan Stanley. Jose, you were 20 minutes late to a meeting, and it's a good thing.
Yes, it was. Fortunately enough, I didn't consider being late for that important meeting. But when I arrived there, the first thing that I was notified by my boss, who was in charge there, Mr. Mercer.
That in the South Tower, 44th floor, right?
Correct. I spoke with him that morning, and I apologized. I said to him that I would finish up the paperwork that I needed to be done. He then expected me at a particular time. In the process of doing the paperwork, I heard a rumble of debris apparently hitting the facade of the building in that morning.
How about a plane hitting the North Tower is what happened, right?
Correct. I wasn't aware of it. I did not know.
Even in the 5 building, you weren't even aware that a plane had slammed into it?
No, I was not aware of it. I didn't find out until I see people running out from the cubicles from the far end of the floor.
All right.
Running out, unclear as to what actually happened. What I did was that I notified my colleagues by radio, finding out what was going on.
In the South Tower, telling them what's happening.
What's happening, correct. They informed me that I got interjected by another call from another colleague of mine at the 6th floor of 5 World Trade Center, who informed me that a plane had apparently hit the North Tower at that morning. I took the liberty of calling and returning back the transmission by radio, via radio, to the corporate security office on the 44th floor of Building 2, which is the South Tower.
Right.
They responded back to me by saying to stand by at this point.
You're on 5, you're on ground floor.
That's right.
All right. So as we cycle through, the north is hit. Minutes later, South Tower gets hit.
Correct. The South Tower gets hit during the process of evacuation. Now, mind you, I've gotten a portion of the people out of the building at that time.
South.
Right. 5 World Trade Center was still evacuating when the South Tower was hit. We were still in the process of evacuation.
What was the word in the South Tower once the North Tower was hit? Because we've heard evacuation and we've heard people were told stay at your desk.
Well, it's a confusion and conflict there. The Port Authority had called when the North Tower was hit that they had everything under control, that people, for what I understand, were told that they can return back to their cubicles,
right,
to their workstation. It was safe.
And Jose, we just have to get to the point where the South Tower starts to collapse.
Right.
You have to run for your life. You have to scale a car. Everything's coming around you, and as we look outside with that the jib camera over to the left down, you dove right where those white buildings were, and only scaffolding prevented you from being crushed.
I was fortunate. I think I was blessed for some reason. As I was running out of the South Tower, I saw an umbrella of debris cascading down, and my first thought was to look for refuge, and my refuge was to go back into the building. My first thought is to go back into the building, but then I decided not to, and run as
saved
fast.
Your life.
Yes, it saved my life. If it wasn't for the scaffolding that was right across the street, I don't know what I would.
Jose Ramirez, a tremendous story. Thanks so much for sharing with us. Yeah, and thanks and congratulations on surviving. We're all pleased by that. You've got another job. You're still right here in downtown.
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much, Jose Ramirez. Not the only fire department wasn't the only one, and police department and Port Authority weren't the only people saving people on that fateful day. Let's go back to Edie and Steve.
All right, Brian, thanks very much. Army Sergeant Chris Brayman was both a survivor and a hero 1 year ago today. His story is featured in National Geographic Channel's Inside the Pentagon that runs tonight. Take a look.
We wanted to get in there. We knew at first hand what we had saw inside. If we didn't hurry up and get back in there, there was going to be anybody else left. Because you could see people burning in the windows.
And Army Sergeant Chris Brayman joins us live from the Pentagon this morning. Good morning to you, Sergeant.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Take us back 1 year ago. Seconds before the plane hit your building, you were on the phone with your wife.
I was on my phone with my wife on the 3rd floor. She was telling me what was going on up in New York, and I told her not to worry, I love you, and as soon as I hung up, I got to go, I was thrown forward. We evacuated out. As I came down the stairwell, I came out the door, the mall entrance to the right of me, there was a Department of Defense police officer struggling, carrying a lady and a baby, and I grabbed the baby from the officer's arms. We ran for about 65 yards, placed the baby back in the woman's hands. She kept repeatedly saying, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And we placed her back in her arms. She was obviously in shock at that point. The officer instructed me to go get help, go get help. At that point, I ran to an ambulance on the 110 freeway.
The character of the story. Who connects the story to the viewer's life? It's not enough to have a great story. We can all come up with great stories. We have to be great storytellers.
CNN Headline News. News, real fast.
For the first look at what's happening in your world.
From wherever the story is happening. Every day, every night, everywhere. You can depend on CNN. Covering the day's news live.
One story at a time. It's time to talk with a little attitude. The people and the issues inside politics.
For the latest news from Washington and around the world.
Policy and newsmakers from the nation's capital.
When you need to know how it all adds up.
Fiery debate from the left and the right.
Everyday people, extraordinary stories.
It's the people you'll be talking about tomorrow, tonight.
For a different way of looking at the story.
Every day, every night,
everywhere.
You can depend
on CNN.
CNN.
CNN. You can depend on CNN.
world remembers September 11th on the first anniversary of the attacks today. Armed with anti-aircraft missiles guard Washington for the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And security's up, but the number of flights is down today as the feds, flyers, and the airlines react to the attacks. Good morning, everybody. It is 6:30 Eastern on a Wednesday morning. We're glad to have you with us here at CNN Headline News. I'm Robin Mead, and more on those stories in just a moment. But first, a few surprises in primary elections around the country. The biggest may be in New Hampshire. That is where second-term Senator Bob Smith has lost the GOP Senate battle to Congressman John Sununu. But Smith is the first elected senator to lose a primary in 10 years. Sununu took about 54% of the vote. He'll face Democratic Governor Jeanne Shaheen make that in November. Now, in North Carolina, Elizabeth Dole easily won that state's Republican Senate nomination. She hopes to replace retiring Senator Jesse Helms. She'll face former Clinton Chief of Staff Erskine Bowles. Now, another surprise in Florida to tell you about this morning. Former Attorney General Janet Reno is closely trailing Tampa lawyer Bill McBride for the state's Democratic gubernatorial bid. Thousands of votes, though, are still being counted from 3 South Florida counties. There were problems, you see, with the new touchscreen voting systems. At least one precinct used paper ballots instead. The winner faces Governor Jeb Bush in November. Well, on most people's mind today is the anniversary of the September 11th attacks. It comes with a Code Orange terror alert as well. Now, as a precaution, armed missile launchers on Humvees are in locations around the nation's capital. At the request of the Pentagon, CNN is not disclosing where those systems are. Well, the Pentagon first intended to deploy the systems unarmed. You might remember we talked about that as an exercise dubbed Clear Skies 2. But Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld has changed it to a mission to protect the United States. Well, you know that America is pausing today to remember the first anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Judy Fortin is joining us this morning to tell you what is being planned and what's happening on this anniversary. Judy, nice to have you here.
Thanks, Robin. Just a little over 2 hours from now, the first commemoration will begin in New York. We're going to take a look at some of the events coming up there this morning. At 8:46 a.m., all the music and movement will stop at Ground Zero for a moment of silence, marking the exact minute that American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A few minutes later, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani will read the first names on the list of more than 2,800 people who died at the Twin Towers. At 9:03, a bell will ring to mark the crash of United Airlines Flight 175 into the South Tower. And at 9:59, another bell will mark the South Tower's collapse. Then at 10:29, taps will be played and bells will sound to mark the moment when the North Tower collapsed. A 90-minute memorial is planned at the Pentagon to honor the 125 who were killed when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the building. A moment of silence, the unfurling of a flag, a speech by President Bush, and an Air Force flyover are just some of the commemorations planned there for this morning. And at a field in southwestern Pennsylvania, 30,000 people are expected to gather to honor those who died there aboard United Flight 93. The widow of the pilot of that flight and Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge are among the scheduled speakers. There will also be a moment of silence and a 21-gun salute. Now, before the day ends, President Bush will have visited all 3 of those locations. The president started his day quite differently a year ago. He was reading to elementary school children in Sarasota, Florida, when he learned that the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At first, he thought it was a horrible accident, but minutes later, we're told his Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, whispered in his ear that a second plane had hit the South Tower and that America was under attack. The president, as you know, was hustled off to Air Force One and flown to military bases in Louisiana and Nebraska before arriving back at the White House that evening, where he told his national security team to, quote, get the troops ready. Now, that same team and other top military brass will be on hand this morning when the president delivers a speech at the Pentagon. He will then fly to Pennsylvania, where he will lay a wreath in a field in Shanksville, where United Flight 93 crashed. He'll also meet privately with family members. A few hours later, he'll be laying a wreath at Ground Zero in New York. He's scheduled to walk down the ramp through an honor guard and meet with 100 family members representing each rescue group. Mr. Bush will end his day on Ellis Island with a live televised address to the nation at 9 p.m. and the Statue of Liberty will be his backdrop. The anniversary is being marked in other parts of the world. In France, a ceremony has just ended at the U.S. Embassy. French President Jacques Chirac spoke, followed by a playing of the American and French national anthems. And after that, there was a moment of silence. A commemoration was also held outside the U.S. Embassy in London just about 90 minutes ago. A lieutenant with the New York Police Department presented a tattered and faded British flag found in the rubble of the World Trade Center to the Home Secretary, David Plunkett. And just about half an hour from now, Robin, we'll start seeing families who will begin arriving at Ground Zero, along with some of the rescue workers and other dignitaries who will be on hand today.
Stands to be a number of people there, for sure. Such an important day, too, for the nation to hear from President Bush. Can you talk a little bit about what else he'll be doing today?
Absolutely. About half an hour from now, he'll also start his day with a private church service at St. John's Church, not far from the White House. We're expecting to see him, too, sometime around 8:30, 8:45, when he will also have a moment of silence at the White House along with the First Lady.
All right. Thank you so much, Judy. Appreciate the information. Well, memories of September 11th have the troops in Afghanistan on high alert. At the U.S.-dominated air base in Bagram, troops paused for a moment of silence as they raised and then lowered the American flag to half-staff today during a ceremony. Spot checks on the base are more frequent for the anniversary of the attacks. Soldiers say that their September 11th memories remain as they fight the war against terrorists.
We are winning in little increments day by day, but this is going to be a long-term battle, and it's going to take all elements of the government, not just the military. It's going to include aid to the people and assistance throughout the region if we're really going to stamp this out.
Now, I need to tell you, though, that the Bagram base came under fire today. The U.S. military officials say that a gunman opened fire on a checkpoint along the base's perimeter. American troops fired back, and one Afghan national was wounded. Meanwhile, facing danger, U.S. troops keep weakening al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan. A suspected al-Qaeda financier has been captured there. He was picked up along with 8 other people in what's called Operation Champion Strike. While the latest push to disarm Afghans and detain terrorist fugitives ended today, coalition forces have recovered weapons, including AK-47s, explosive booby traps, and rocket launchers. They've also confiscated satellite phones, passports, and Taliban and al-Qaeda documents. Well, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Abdullah is expressing his country's condolences on this day of remembrance. In a letter to President Bush and the American people, the Crown Prince promises that his country will do its utmost to combat terrorism. He also expressed great pain at the fact that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens. Now, Russia's president sent his country's condolences through a phone call to the White House. After the attacks, Vladimir Putin was the first world leader to call President Bush. He became a key U.S. ally in the military operation in Afghanistan by opening Russian airspace to U.S. flights. We want to know how you are observing September 11th. Also, your thoughts today. Send us an email if you have the time at robinandcompany@cnn.com, and we'll read your comments throughout the morning. Once again, robinandcompany@cnn.com. Right now, 38 minutes after the hour, let's get you some business news. There is a fork in the road soon for CarMax in Circuit City. Shareholders for the used car chain have voted to spin the company off October 1st. Circuit City started that chain back in 1993. On Wall Street, the markets are going to be opening late today. Trading will start about 30 minutes after the conclusion of the memorial service at Ground Zero. That's not expected, though, until at least 11 a.m. Eastern. Investors will try to extend their 3-day winning streak. Yesterday, the Dow Jones Industrials closed up 83 points. The Nasdaq rose 15, and the S&P 500 climbed 6. We have some major league highlights coming your way, including a big win for one player. More on that story for you. Also in California, firefighters are not giving up on brush fires. That story and more headlines coming for you right here at Headline News.
Wherever news breaks, depend on the people of CNN for live coverage you won't find anywhere else. Whenever the story happens, from hot spots around the world, CNN is already there, on the ground with over 1,000 of the most experienced journalists worldwide. Every day, every night, everywhere. Depend on the people of CNN.
Your generous support has made it possible for United Way to help build strong communities across America for over 100 years. Thank you. Now more than ever, it's crucial that we maintain the strength and vitality of our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. United Way is active in local communities 365 days a year, making a measurable difference in the lives of Americans. Helping local communities identify pressing issues and opportunities and committing the resources necessary to address them. United Way helps to strengthen America one community at a time. Your local United Way has relied on your generous support for years. Your community is counting on you. Please continue to support your local United Way. Strong communities mean a stronger America.
A high-ranking Al-Qaeda operative was spilling the beans, being held by another country. They say it was not Abu Zubaydah, but they say, Edie, that the threat was such that it warranted us ratcheting it up. And now a number of embassies around the world are closed, and members of the U.S. military around Washington, D.C. this morning have live missiles.
And these are similar to what they heard a year ago today, but didn't know how to respond to them. Today we are on high alert. It is 1 year after the attacks of 9/11, the day America changed. It is 7 o'clock here on the East Coast.
One year ago today, the world watched in disbelief as terrorists hit the heart of America. They seized control of our planes and toppled our towers. But although they killed thousands, they could not touch what makes us strong. Our country survives. Our spirit endures. On this September 11th, 1 year later.
You look at the Statue of Liberty there, and you can put any face in America on top of hers, because what it comes down to is we're all responsible for preserving our liberty, and a lot of people are focusing on that today.
You know what? We're calling this the day America changed, and it did change in so many ways as we look at Ground Zero, where in just about an hour and 45 minutes, the official moment of silence will start. Brian Kilmeade is down there right now. Brian, we see people or something going down that 500-foot steel ramp. What's going on?
Significant, Steve, because no one's gone down that ramp outside workers. It seems to be organized. It is not the families, we understand. That's supposed to be in just an hour, and that's why, in particular, the families in many cases are coming here today, because they know it just rips you apart to come back down to. For many people, it'll be the closest to a grave site that they get, because it's their only, or at least their first opportunity to go down into the pit before they agree on some type of rebuilding effort, if anything, or at least a memorial, if they just agree on that, as Rudy Giuliani has urged. But right now, they're heading down into there in an organized way, and I believe these are mostly to be Port Authority, NYPD, and FDNY going down there. They are beginning to gather in all four sections, all four corners, including right down the block from us here on Church Street. And honor guard beginning to file in. The bagpipe band. It looks like, as Mark, as you make your way down that block and turn it around just a little bit, you can see the police gathering in the corner in full dress. They've been through so many ceremonies, so many funerals, so many memorial services. They're going to do it again today.
You know, Brian, the United States of America has gone through so much. I mean, think back to our own personal lives and how we changed. You know, it wasn't too long, shortly after 9/11, suddenly people were talking about buying gas masks, and there were a lot of people around America who were burning their mail, and flight attendants would actually call in bomb threats because they were afraid to fly on their own airlines. People throughout the Midwest who've gone to bed every night of their lives with the doors unlocked suddenly were locking their doors. And Walmart, the nation's biggest retailer, did something that they'd never imagined possible. They sold out of American flags.
Yeah, I'm looking here and looking around, and as I talk to the cops, you look at the storefronts and you think, okay, that's a pizza place, that's a department store. He says, no. That is where the cops and firemen had lunch, breakfast, and dinner 24 hours a day. Oh, over there, that department store?
Right.
That was the makeshift morgue.
Right.
Oh, where you guys were? Well, that was cleared out for about 4 or 5 months, and now that it's rebuilt, people are allowed back in. So these are going to have double significance in this entire area, at the very least, until they start rebuilding.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not just that, but I look at it and I see how the innocence is gone. You know, when I left for work 2 days ago, my little 6-year-old said, what if they bomb, that was the term he used, bomb the Twin Towers again? And I explained, well, there are no Twin Towers anymore.
Right.
But it's gone. When you're talking about terrorism with a 6-year-old, you realize that's been lost.
My daughter, Sally, asked me, she said, now, Dad, on 9/11, you're not going to be in a tall building, are you? I said, absolutely not, honey. I'm going to be in a short building on the ground floor. And I'm
right there, you're seeing shots right by, I'm sorry, St. Paul's Church, right around the block there. And look at the different countries represented. Not only are they visiting from different countries, so many countries lost their own citizens.
And that is the Shanksville shot that you can see of United Airlines Flight 93.
Right now, today, on this special edition of our program, we're looking back at how much the world as we know it has changed. Let's go back to Rick Leventhal 1 year ago today.
We're on Church Street. We're not sure what happened. There's been a huge explosion. Everyone's running for their lives, literally. Police, media. I see a woman pushing a baby carriage. Here comes the smoke. Here comes the smoke.
Go ahead, Rick.
It's unclear what happened, if the tower collapsed or what, but I think we better get out of this mess, dude. I think we better get out of this.
Rick and our crew, the lucky ones, a number of people working for media companies on top of the buildings.
Running the transmitters.
They were lost.
Rick Leventhal joins us now from Ground Zero. Rick, you know, we see that that wave of dust a lot, you know, when people are talking about what happened. You see it, but, you know, we didn't know what it felt like. What did it feel like?
I still get chills every time I see that video, by the way. It was very unsettling, the whole event, and it felt, the smoke itself was very acrid, and it smelled bad, it tasted bad, and filled our lungs very quickly. Pat Butler, the engineer, was hacking. When we jumped in that truck to get away from that 300-foot tall cloud, we didn't know what was going to happen next. It was a very, very dark moment, and the world did turn black. The lights went out, in essence. It got very, very dark inside the truck, and we literally thought we were going to die in there.
You know what, Rick? It's kind of like one of those nightmares everybody always has, where something bad is happening, and you're trying to outrun it, and you can't because it's going faster than you are.
Right, and we didn't know what was going on. We had no cell service. We didn't have TVs that were working at that time. We had no idea. We thought, we felt the rumble. We heard the roar. We thought perhaps the tower had fallen down and people were yelling and screaming and running at us, but we didn't know for sure, and not knowing was almost worse than knowing, because anything could have been happening. It was a horrible moment. I want to give you guys a look at where we are right now at the World Financial Center, which is right across Ground Zero from where Brian is, and we're basically right up above the pit here. And I want to show you where there are members of the media from around the world here gathered behind me for a good vantage point as the ceremonies get underway. And up on the side of this building, a giant American flag. These buildings, the World Financial Center, were heavily damaged when those towers fell down, and have since been repaired, and many businesses that were forced to leave have since moved back in. And then down in the pit there, if we can come back to this camera, as you've been saying, the people are now making their way down in there. A lot of people in uniform, police officers, firefighters. I saw people dressed in military uniforms, and some in plain clothes also now going down into the pit, sort of a staging area down there for the events that will be taking place here shortly. And we can also show you people who are lined up just outside the fence to watch the events as they transpire. And in the center there is a large podium that's been set up where the former Mayor Rudy Giuliani and other dignitaries and members of victims' families will read the names of all of the more than 2,800 people who lost their lives here that day. We'll give you a look down the West Side Highway here, actually up the West Side Highway, where there is heavy security in place, and will be more security as this ceremony draws near, there are barricades lining the street and police officers everywhere, and they will basically shut this area down to protect and ensure that this area is safe and secure. And then we'll just give you another vantage point here as we look around Ground Zero, which has been dramatically altered in the last 12 months. And beyond it, big crowds gathering on street corners, almost every corner across on the other side there. People just lining up and have been since early this morning to watch as the ceremony gets underway at about 8:47 a.m. There will be a minute of silence, and then bells will ring across the city, and then the speeches and the reading of the names will begin. Thousands expected, a very dramatic day. And you know, Brian was talking earlier about the fires, and that's what strikes me. In the days and the weeks after those towers came down, there was just a gigantic pile of smoking rubble and steel and debris, and the fires would not go out. There was smoke down here for months after those towers came down, and the change here is simply dramatic.
All right, Rick Leventhal live at Ground Zero. Well, ironically, September the 11th, 1941, is the day that they broke ground on the Pentagon. We know what happened there on September the 11th, 2001. What's going on September the 11th, 2002? Steve Centani joins us live from the Pentagon. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Steve. Today we'll look back and remember here at the Pentagon to what happened 1 year ago when American Airlines Flight 77 plowed into this building. There will be a remembrance ceremony starting in just a couple of hours. President Bush, as you know, making the rounds of all the places where Americans lost their lives on September 11th. This will be his first stop, and he will speak at this ceremony surrounded by school children who will join him in the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, there will be a moment of silence at 9:37 this morning. That's the exact moment a year ago when Flight 77 slammed into this building, killing 125 people who were working inside and 59 others who were passengers and crew aboard that jetliner. About 100 people were seriously injured, many of them still struggling to recover from serious burns and other injuries. Now, those injured workers will be here today along with hundreds of family members of those who lost their lives. Now, one of the injured was Navy Lieutenant Kevin Schaefer, who suffered second and third degree burns over much of his body. He recently described those horrifying moments just after the building was hit.
Flight 77, when it struck the Pentagon, it passed through the Navy Command Center. What had been a bustling, alive space just seconds beforehand had basically instantly killed everyone around me. And I knew I was on fire, so I had to first extinguish the flames on my body and then find a way to escape. And as I crawled and climbed over the debris, I ultimately found a hole that had been blown out in the back of our space and went into a new office space, got through that, and walked outside.
Now, ever since that tragic day, of course, work has continued here practically around the clock to rebuild the damaged sections of the building. It's called the Phoenix Project. It involved 3,000 workers who were determined to finish the rebuilding before this date. And in fact, they did achieve their goal. They were even ahead of schedule. The first workers started moving into that rebuilt section of the Pentagon 1 month ago, and the last of them just a few days ago. Security here, of course, very tight. In fact, there are Avenger surface-to-air missiles stationed at various locations around Washington, D.C. as part of a military exercise, and the president decided just yesterday those would be armed. There will be missiles in them just in case. As we look back and remember that dark day 1 year ago, authorities here are taking no chances. Steve and Edie, back to you.
All right, Steve Centani, thanks very much. You know what? Down in the corner, you can see all the stock information about the world exchanges and the S&P futures and stuff like that. For the first time in history today, the New York Stock Exchange is actually going to delay their opening. Sometimes on holidays, they get out early. They leave at 1 o'clock or something like that. This is the first time in history they're actually going to delay the opening. They opened this morning at 11 o'clock.
Why 11?
I think because they're going to be going to a number of memorials this morning, and they figure they can be back in their office and do some
people will
trading.
be able to.
Information officer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Edie, back to you.
Thank you, Bridget. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has been instrumental in getting the Big Apple moving behind the 9/11 attacks and the rebuilding efforts. Mayor Bloomberg joins us now from New York's financial district. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is going to be a difficult morning, I assume, for you, leading our city through the remembrance, while at the same time trying to retain that strength and resolve. You've chosen to read from the Four Freedoms, I believe, today.
Yes.
What was so significant in that really resonated within you?
Well, 2,800 lives were taken because some people in the world found those freedoms so threatening and distasteful. And I think there's nothing we can do to remember those we lost as much as explain why their lives were snuffed out, and that we're not going to let the people that tried to destroy everything America was built on win, that we're going to take us forward.
Similar to our previous mayor, Mayor Giuliani, I know that you are very close with your family. Your daughters work closely with you. You spend a lot of time with them. You're going to have the families of the victims surrounding you this morning. What will you tell them?
Well, I think everybody has to remember their loved ones internally. You can't understand somebody else's grief for people they lost. I'm going to remember the 3 employees my company had and the 1 firefighter that I knew. That's the personal involvement. Looking at 2,800 families, your heart goes out to them. But all I can do is try to build a better world going forward in memory of their loved ones. They really have to grieve themselves. I think that this is a very personal thing, and one of the reasons we're trying to have a very understated, quiet, serious, solemn ceremony is because I think people really do have to grieve by themselves. They look at different images, they think, they have their moment of silence, they light their candle. But in the end, it's between them and God and their loved ones.
We know that the city, the country, on a high state of alert now. After it was ratcheted up yesterday, the Pentagon very secure at this moment. What makes you feel secure in New York City now?
Well, New York City has stayed at the high level of security that we started a year ago. We've been at Code Orange all this time. We have the world's best police department. We focus an enormous amount of resources on intelligence gathering here in New York and around the world. We have a whole division that works on counterterrorism. The police are very well trained and equipped, and we think that this day will be a safe day. Clearly, we are focused a little more on it, but we have to, tomorrow and the next day, maintain the safety of people in New York City, not just today. So our focus is longer term. I think that you'll find today to be a peaceful day. I think what people can do as individuals, if you see something suspicious, call 911, but basically leave security to the professionals. What we can do is hug our kids one extra time, maybe before we go to work, and we can go about our business. We can take a moment of silence. We can light a candle. This will be a safe day.
Mayor Michael Bloomberg, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The beginning of a busy day for you. Appreciate it.
A sense as to what kind of prayers you are thinking and where your heart is for yourself as you work on that.
I think about myself right now. I think about the families, the children. I'm a loving guy, and I'm also someone, however, who's got a job to do, and I intend to do it. And this is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
Welcome back, everyone. Brian Kilmeade, right at Ground Zero. Sally Reaganhart lost her son, her probationary firefighter, at 28 years old. He was assigned to Engine 279. She, by the way, his name Christian. She now co-chairs the Skyscraper Safety Campaign. You've seen her all around. Unfortunately, we've had to have seen you all around because people are concerned about why, Sally, those buildings fell. At first look, of course, they got hit by a plane. But on second look, third look, we thought, wait a second. Were these really built with safety in mind?
Yes, right. Well, you know, it's very apparent here because if you look around in back of us, there's a building right to our rear, the building where that sign is there with the heart. That's a building that burnt for several hours on 9/11. It never fell. This empty spot over here is where building number 7 was, completely collapsed, never hit by a plane. People have to realize you cannot buy into the spin that the buildings fell because they were hit by a plane. You have buildings that burned and collapsed that were never touched by a plane. You have buildings that were built according to the former building code.
Right.
And they're still standing. We have buildings in this city and in other cities that have burned for 6 hours at a time and never collapsed. So we have a problem here with construction. We have to look at a lot of issues. We have to look at our building codes. We have to look at spray-on fireproofing. We have to look at so many things.
Yeah, right now one thing I do want to look at, and yes, we have to look at, is Christian.
Yes.
Lost him at 28 years old. A former Marine decides he wants to be a firefighter, and as a probationary firefighter, he went right in.
Yes.
What else do we know about that day?
Well, you know, whatever I know about that day, I read in the New York Times. I did find out on that day.
From Christian's perspective, I mean. Do you know, was he in right away? Did he get the call?
Well, that's what I mean. I have no information about that. I mean, all I know is that his ladder company was sent there, his engine company. I don't know anything else about it. But the thing that really troubles me about that day is what I do know is that Christian was sent in to the World Trade Center without a plan and with radios that did not work. He was sent in there with no unified command structure in this city. He was sent in there with the police department not communicating to the fire department that 21 minutes in advance they felt that the second tower was in danger of collapsing. So I know so little about where he was sent, why he was sent in there, what he was supposed to accomplish with radios that didn't work. This is such a sad and terrible day. And when I think that I know that his death was needless, and so was the death of the 343 firefighters.
Has it made it? Have you gained any solace by the action you've taken and the skyscraper safety and the reforms that could be in play because of people like yourself?
I'd say maybe I have 1% of solace. Other people say that we've accomplished a lot. I expected to have more. 1 year later, the investigation is just starting. It's taking a baby step. It has just received its funding that FEMA was holding on to, the $16 million. It's just starting. You know, we've had 12 different investigations into the collapse of Enron over this last year. Not one investigation into why the World Trade Center collapsed and 3,000 people were murdered by 2 buildings. We're starting the investigation, the NIST investigation. I'm encouraged by it, but I'm very discouraged that it took 1 year.
Sally Reagan-Hart, I know it's going to be an emotional day. Thanks so much for coming down, talking about an issue. And Christian, I know, will be proud.
Thank you.
And we have a chance to talk to him. Thanks again, Sally. All right, Stephen Eady, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Brian.
A mix of emotions today. Some people say they feel comforted. They are moving on with their lives. Others say not enough has been done. They don't feel secure. They don't have their questions answered.
I walked by a firehouse here in the neighborhood yesterday. I saw a sign that said, "All gave some gave all." Of course, one thing after 9/11, suddenly, within hours, people were saying this is the handiwork of Osama bin Laden. Geraldo Rivera is in Tora Bora this morning on the trail, trying to retrace where bin Laden went. When it looked like Geraldo, we had him in our crosshairs.
Stephen Eady, you know, this is a tough day. Just listening to the show this morning, all the emotions ebbing and flowing, it's a very difficult day for all Americans. But even as we remember, and even as we try to see through the haze, the tears for the victims, our fear for the future, there's one picture I want everyone to remember, a picture aside from the one that's been branded on our soul, the picture of those towers collapsing. It is this picture, the picture of Osama bin Laden's pride and joy. This was his principal training camp. This was his principal recreational spot. That young soldier is standing by Osama bin Laden's swimming pool. Look at it, it's a filthy mess now that the cows used to defecate. Panning the camera over, Christian, that field is the field where his proud troops learned their taekwondo and their martial arts. It was devastated by a daisy cutter. Panning over further still, you see the armor with which Osama threatened this region. Now nothing more than a poster for insulting graffiti written in Arabic and then the local language, insulting to bin Laden and his troops. Pan over further still, that was the terror mastermind's actual mansion. It was there that he lorded over this valley like a pasha from the 15th century, and look at it now. It's well and good to remember the crime. We have to memorialize the victims, but also remember the punishment. Look over here, his kitchens, his other pride, where he served guests that filled 6 bedrooms. And then look up into the valley from which he ruled a terror empire that was worldwide. Now it's a valley that is in the hands of the Afghan people, the Taliban government. Osama bin Laden's cronies and puppets are gone. Al-Qaeda pummeled and scattered. And I know where Osama bin Laden is. He's either 6 feet under here someplace, or he's a sissy hiding under the bed in some hovel, hoping against hope that a special operator doesn't kick down the door and put a bullet in his damn ear. That's where Osama bin Laden is. And it's interesting to note and important to remember that the war on terror is far from over. But we must remember, through the haze of our tears and through the up and down, the passion and emotion of today, the good guys are winning. Back to you, Stephen Adie.
Geraldo Rivera, always a straight talker. Geraldo.
Live in Afghanistan. Thank you.
This is 9/11, the day America changed.
I think people in New York, the best way they can deal with this right now is not only to deal with their own grief, which we all feel and have, but to show that we're not going to be in any way affected by this, that we're not going to be cowed by it, that we're not afraid, that we're going to go about our business and lead normal lives and not let these cowards affect us.
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani remembers all too well the impact of September 11th on his city.
Time magazine named him the Person of the Year, and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani joins us now from downtown New York. It is a day you'll be comforting a lot of families, and I'd like to begin by offering you our condolences on the loss of your mother.
Thank you very much.
You're going to have a very difficult job because a lot of people do turn to you still, even though Mayor Bloomberg is leading the city now, they still turn to you for guidance and for emotional stability. What will you do for the families today?
I met one gentleman on the way in here today. I'll do the same thing that I always did. I'll share with him the loss. I mean, I lived through this. I lost some very, very close friends, people that I knew for many years and people that I loved and that I saw maybe 15 minutes before they died, and I was trapped in a building. I had to get out, was on the street and lived through it. So the fact that it's a shared experience means I don't just comfort them, they comfort me. I mean, going to all the funerals and memorial services and being with these families, yes, I give them comfort and some strength, but I don't think they'll ever realize how much strength they've also given me to lead the city for those 4 months and then to do the things I'm doing now to get through it.
Mr. Mayor, we talked to you on your last day in office here in New York City, and I asked you what the best day of your term was, and I asked you what the worst day was, and I knew what that was, but I was surprised that you said the best and the worst day were the same day.
Yeah, no question about it. It's the most contradictory day of my life, maybe the most contradictory day in the history of this country. It was the worst day because it was the worst attack in the history of this country. We lost so many people. It was the best day because of the heroic response of my police officers, firefighters, the other police officers, all of the people, the generosity of the response, the heroism of it. And maybe I know from being up close and right there how many people they saved.
Yeah.
I mean, the first calculations that I received of the losses at the World Trade Center were 3 and 4 times what we ultimately experienced, which is no consolation for me or the others, but it's the reality that these men and women
conducted a rescue operation unlike anything anyone's ever been able to accomplish before. And, you know, if you had a chance to do it on a computer, I don't know that all the fortuitous circumstances had come together and you'd be able to save that many people. So there's, you know, there's tremendous pride in the accomplishment that they had. And then, you know, then I watch as I travel around the country how their sacrifice, you know, not running away, not cowering, not abandoning the post, gave America a rebirth of patriotism.
You will be down at Ground Zero today. There's, of course, a lot of discussion about what should happen there next, what kind of rebuilding, if any. And you've come out very different than a lot of other people by suggesting that there should not be these towers or businesses, office buildings going up again. What leads you to feel that?
Well, I mean, this is my view, and everybody is entitled to different views about this, but my view is this should exclusively, if not primarily, be a memorial. But a soaring, grand structure should be built that adds to the skyline of the city, memorializes the people that were lost here, the bravery we're talking about, the contradictions we're talking about, and then ultimately, I'd like to see a library, a museum, and something that would draw millions of people to this area, the way they're drawn to Normandy, Gettysburg. This is beyond us. This is part of our history now. And I would not want to see it built over with just plain, you know, with just office buildings. There's got to be something else. We can build office buildings a lot of places. We can't build this memorial any place than on this sacred ground.
Mr. Mayor, yesterday the Attorney General revealed to the United States that we are now ratcheting up our terror alert status. We're now at high alert. We went from yellow to orange, and the president, through his spokesman, said, you know what, just go ahead and live your life. Do what you were going to do on September the 11th. But clearly, the intelligence people know something. There's some chatter out there. There have been some threats. You know, we've looked to you so many times over the last year. Tell us what to do today.
Land of the free and the home of the brave. Remember that second part, because they're connected to each other. You can't have freedom without courage. And the reality is that we should go ahead with our lives, and we should not let the risk of terrorism psychologically affect us. Let the Attorney General worry about this, the mayors, the governors, the FBI, the police. They do plenty of worrying about it and plenty of things about it. And, you know, if we see something, then report it.
Right.
But otherwise, let's not give them a psychological victory. They don't deserve it. And it's the only way they can have a victory, because they're not strong enough to take us over unless we let them take over our minds.
Yeah, land of the free, though.
We're not going to have that happen.
Won by the sacrifice of many.
Absolutely. We're the land of the free because we have so many brave people that are willing to give up their lives. And in their names, including our soldiers and sailors who are carrying on this effort to end global terrorism, in their names, we should be brave. We should go about our lives.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
He can pick up that phone now. All right, 17 minutes.
Have been making improvements to the base recently.
People that now, if a family actually outreach to give you a voice, or myself, or to anyone about 9/11.